Welcome to Reddit Guy, where we break down real stories from Reddit. If you enjoy real drama and honest discussions, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Story 1. Am I the asshole for firing my nanny after she didn't correct people who thought she was my child's mother? I am a 35-year-old Asian American woman, and my significant other is a 38-year-old white man. Our 2-year-old child ended up inheriting all of my partner's recessive genes and looks almost entirely white. This is a sore point for me because I am often mistaken for the babysitter rather than the mother. We have a nanny, Mary, who is 25 years old. Coincidentally, she has the same hair and eye coloring as my child, very light golden brown hair and greenish hazel eyes. Mary is great with my child and genuinely seems to care about them. I work long and unusual hours as an emergency physician, so I don't see my neighbors very often. Today, I happened to have a day off and ran into a neighbor while I was walking with my child. The neighbor said hello to my child and then asked if I was the new nanny. I told her no, that I was the mother. The neighbor looked very confused and said she had been under the impression that Mary was the mom. At first, I was annoyed, but I assumed it was an honest mistake. A lot of people think this when they see Mary and my child together because of their similar coloring. However, the neighbor then told me that Mary had been telling people she was the mother, and that she had also heard my child refer to Mary as Mama. The next time Mary came over, I confronted her about it. She brushed it off and said she didn't actually tell people she was the mom, she just didn't correct their assumptions. I then asked her about my child calling her Mama. Mary said it was short for her name. Her name isn't actually Mary, but it does start with Ma. At that point, I was extremely angry. I told her she was fired. Mary became very upset and started crying. She said she needed the money, that she loved my child, and that this was incredibly unfair. I stood my ground and told her to leave. I ended up leaving my child with my mother so I could go to work. Later that day, my husband came home and was angry with me for firing Mary without consulting him, and for not having a backup childcare plan. We are now scrambling to find a new nanny or daycare as soon as possible, and my mother is watching our child in the meantime. My husband thinks I overreacted and believes I am sensitive to this issue because our child doesn't look like me. I do feel like an asshole now because our childcare situation is a mess and Mary is out of work with no notice. But at the same time, it feels very sketchy to me that someone was effectively masquerading as my child's mother. So, am I the asshole? Edit. I want to clarify that my sensitivity does not stem from the fact that my child doesn't look like me physically, but from the racial undertones involved in the automatic assumption that I, a person of color, must be the babysitter. Most white adoptive parents are not mistaken for babysitters when they're out with children of color. However, parents of color with white passing children are almost always assumed to be nannies rather than either adoptive or biological parents. What bothers me is the inherent racism behind this assumption, despite the fact that my child clearly treats me as their mother. Second edit. I want to defend my husband just in case he ever stumbles upon this post. There is virtually no chance that he's involved with Mary. He also works long hours and barely interacts with her. I doubt he even knows her full name. The idea that they would be seeing each other behind my back actually made me laugh. He's mostly upset about the sudden childcare crisis, which is honestly understandable. He is not actually defending Mary. Comments. Commenter 1. Not be asshole. The fact that your neighbor initiated a conversation with your child suggests they know your child, which means they have likely had multiple interactions with your former nanny. This wasn't a one-off interaction with a stranger. According to her own version of events, Mary deliberately misled people into believing she was the mother. Even her claim that she simply didn't correct assumptions makes no sense. There would be no reason not to say she was the nanny. In fact, that often gives you an easy exit from uncomfortable conversations. Your neighbor has no reason to lie about overhearing this multiple times. This behavior is extremely odd,
Beyond confusing your neighbors and potentially your child, it shows a lack of emotional stability and poor judgment. I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving a child in her care. At best, she's young and wanted to play pretend as a wealthy stay-at-home mom without considering the impact on your family. You say she was otherwise a good nanny, but this is a huge red flag. Her argument that she loves your child is actually part of the problem. She doesn't seem capable of respecting appropriate boundaries. Unrelated, but I'd be curious whether she ever made advances towards your husband. Original poster's reply. Out of all possible explanations, the most likely one is that she enjoyed pretending she was the stay-at-home wife of a wealthy doctor. The joke's on her, though. My husband and I have a combined $400,000 in medical school debt, and most of our salaries go straight to student loans. Commenter 2. Mary had the perfect opportunity to be a counterexample to the stereotype that people of color are always the nanny, and she chose not to take it. She also sent your child a subconscious message that being white is better, or that you might not be her real mother. As a white person, I would really want to sit Mary down and ask her why she thought any of this was okay. Not the asshole. Original poster's reply. Thank you. This captures exactly why I was so upset. It wasn't just that people mistook Mary for the mother. I wouldn't fire someone over a simple misunderstanding. It was that she seemed to relish the idea that my biracial child was white passing enough that people would assume she was the mom. I didn't go into my conversation with my neighbor planning to fire Mary. What pushed me there was her reaction when I brought it up. She dismissed my feelings and said that my child looks so much like me, of course people will think I'm the mom. She didn't show any remorse until it became clear her job was at risk. Update. I wasn't expecting this to get to so many responses. Thank you. I noticed a lot of dismissive attitudes from non-people of color in the comments. That same dismissiveness is what made me angry with Mary. She downplayed my very real concerns and implied that my child simply looks white. Part of being a good nanny to a biracial child is helping that child understand and feel proud of their heritage. Reflecting on this post made me realize that I had excused many microaggressions from Mary because she was young and otherwise good with my child. For example, she only gave my child lighter-skinned dolls despite us owning dolls of many skin tones. She joked about how much safer our neighborhood was compared to hers. She never fed my child Asian food, even though I stocked the fridge with it and encouraged her to use it. Some people may not understand the significance of microaggressions, but these subtle behaviors shape how young children see themselves. That said, I do sympathize with Mary's financial situation, so I plan to offer her some severance pay. Additional comments. Commenter 1. This reminds me of when my dad was put in handcuffs because he had a white passing child who could possibly not be his. And the time my stepdad, who is white, got questioned for having a black child, me. From my experience, most people don't even consider that biracial children exist. Commenter 2. I'm white, my daughter is white, and she looks exactly like me. Once, I had an elderly woman in a supermarket accuse me of kidnapping my own child because she was crying after I wouldn't buy her ice cream. The store manager called the police. I told them to ask my daughter her name and who her dad was. She answered and pointed at me. That ended it. Commenter 3. At the hospital, they wouldn't bring my newborn brother to my mother because he was born with light hair and blue eyes and didn't look like her. His color changed later. You'd think medical professionals would know better. Story 2. I just lost my dog I had for 10 years and I'm devastated. My boyfriend thinks I'm being ridiculous. The title pretty much explains the situation. I'm a 27-year-old woman and I just lost my dog Alfie, who I had for 10 years. I've had him for a huge chunk of my life and I really loved, well, I guess now loved him. He was my only friend through some really difficult times, and I can't properly express the level of grief I feel over losing him. It was sudden. 2 weeks ago, the postman left the gate open. When I opened my door, Alfie ran straight out and into the road. A car hit him. I saw it happen. It was painful to watch. My boyfriend, who's 25, keeps telling me it's just a dog, that I'm being silly, and that I need to get over it. I've been so upset that I was signed off work for a week just to cope. I'm not sure if this is a cultural thing. He's Albanian and I'm English. He did have a dog at one point that he loved. He even got angry at me for not wanting sex because I was sad. I don't know. Is it that he doesn't care or that he just can't relate to this kind of pain? Comments. Commenter 1. He is a stoic man and tries to be strong. Being stoic and strong does not include calling you silly, telling you to just get over it, or getting upset that you don't want sex while you're grieving. That's not strength. That's being unnecessarily cruel and condescending.
Original poster's reply. I agree, but I also know he doesn't have the language skills to express what he really means. He learned very formal English, and there have been many times where his wording has upset me because of that. I genuinely believe that in this situation, he didn't mean to be a jerk. It was just the language he knew. I've explained this to him now. As for the sex issue, that's something we still need to discuss further. Commenter 2. He doesn't have the language skills to express what he means. How is this a language issue? He even got mad at me for not wanting sex because I was sad. That's not a language problem or a cultural problem. That's a selfish asshole problem. Commenter 3. Hi, I'm Albanian. No, this is not a cultural thing. We get sad when dogs die too. Your boyfriend is just an asshole. Edit. We just spoke on the phone for 15 minutes. He said word for word, I'd never marry you anyway. I said, cool, hung up, and blocked him. It's over, guys. I'm starting again at 27, but I'd rather be alone than be with someone who thinks like that. Update. First of all, I want to thank every single person who commented and gave their condolences for Alfie. I read every comment. I would have loved to reply individually, but there were so many that I couldn't. Your kind words genuinely helped me through an incredibly difficult time. Now for the update. My ex realized he messed up the next day. I had blocked his number, but on my phone you can still see when blocked numbers try to call. They're just automatically rejected. Since that night, he has tried calling me around 15 times a day, from 9 in the morning until midnight. He probably sent texts too, but they didn't come through. I forgot to block him on Instagram at first, so I saw a few messages there before blocking him. They were things like, come on, talk to me, answer your phone, and don't ignore me. There were no apologies, no empathy, just me. Looking back now, I can see this was a pattern. I reread a lot of our past conversations and suddenly saw them clearly. He constantly disregarded my feelings, talked about how terrible his life was, and expected me to feel sorry for him. He framed himself as being good to me regardless of how I felt. He is a nasty, selfish person. I had normalized his behavior for so long that I was actually worried I was being insensitive to him after watching my best friend die. Without the comments on this post, I probably would have stayed with him as long as he wanted. I might have even had a baby with him, which he likely would have used to claim family life so he wouldn't get deported. I would have wasted more time. Thank you to everyone who opened my eyes. And thank you to Alfie, who showed me the truth as his final act as a very good boy. Edit 2. Just to clear something up, since some people are furious and think I quit my job, I didn't. I actually went into work and my manager could immediately see something was wrong. After I told her what happened, she sent me home and told me to take the rest of the day off. I had built up a lot of time off in lieu, and she told me to use it for the rest of the week. My diary was light that week, and she could tell I needed it. My job is emotionally demanding. I work with looked-after children, particularly victims of child sexual exploitation. It was better for everyone that I took that time off while I was struggling. Thank you again for all the support. I won't be posting on this account again, but I hope everyone gives their pup an extra hug tonight. Commenter 1.
Just imagining myself witnessing my dog being hit by a car makes me feel sick. I want to give you a hug. Story 3. My colleague stole my position, and now I get to watch her struggle worse than I ever did. I'm a teacher at a fairly affluent public school. For the most part, I genuinely love my job. I've made real friends among the staff, and the students make the hard work worth it. Like every teaching job, there are negatives you always hear about: low pay, grading outside work hours, and so on, but overall, the deal has been good. A few years ago, my former boss identified me as a potential leader in the building. He said I was very data-oriented and well-liked among my colleagues. I'm good with Google Sheets and Excel when it comes to collecting and organizing student data, and I'm strong with parent communication. I was hesitant at first, but eventually I agreed and took on a leader role for a group of teachers and students. I organized meetings and helped oversee student academic success. Then my old boss left, and I was suddenly working under a new boss I didn't know very well. This is where things started to fall apart. I have sensory processing disorder and mild hearing loss. It's hard to explain, but sometimes I genuinely do not hear things correctly. For example, if someone says, "I'm going to pick up Stacy," I might hear something completely different, like, "I'm gone, just wait and see." This happens at least once a day. It isn't curable, but I manage it. In meetings, my new boss pushed strategies that focused extra attention on students whose state test scores were just below passing. The idea was to focus on all students, but give extra attention to those borderline cases. These initiatives were never written down, which I later realized was because the legality of them was questionable at best. After meetings, I would often ask my boss to repeat herself and then double-check my notes to make sure I heard everything correctly. I noticed she was passively frustrated by this, even though I explained my hearing disorder. Looking back, I wonder if she felt uncomfortable because the strategies weren't exactly kosher and my questions made that more obvious. Now to introduce the main character of this story. I'll call her Tenny since she coaches the tennis team. Tenny is well liked by staff because of her years of service to the community. I liked her too and thought she'd be a great team member. Unfortunately, like my boss, she became increasingly frustrated when I missed things she said, especially in loud, crowded hallways. Sometimes she would shout something at me while walking past, which led to mistakes and misunderstandings. I repeatedly asked her to pause, make sure I understood, or just send me an email. Nothing changed. There were at least 5 or 6 major situations where my hearing accommodation could have been handled with a simple written message. One example still stands out. My new boss came into the hallway to announce that the assembly location had changed. We were supposed to take students to a new area instead of the usual one. I heard that something changed, but not where we were going. Tenny was the only one nearby. I tapped my ear, my usual sign that I didn't hear, and asked where we were going. Tenny answered quickly and walked away. I didn't understand her response. The result? I walked my students around the building in confusion and arrived at the assembly 5 minutes late. When my boss asked what happened, I told her honestly that I didn't hear the instructions clearly. Later, weeks later, I was called into a meeting. My new boss told me I was being removed from my leadership position due to inconsistency and disrespect toward colleagues. When I asked which colleagues, she said that was private. When I asked how I had been disrespectful, she said I seemed frustrated when I said I couldn't hear things and tapped my ear. I explained that tapping my ear is the ASL sign for hear, meaning I can't hear you. She said I should have communicated that earlier. I told her I had consistently asked for written communication. She said I shouldn't always expect it. At that point, I knew it was a losing battle. I loved the school and the community, and fighting my new boss would only make things worse. I wasn't surprised when a school-wide email announced that Tenny had been given my leadership position. Colleagues praised her in reply all emails. It was bitter. I knew she had complained, and watching her get rewarded for it hurt. The next school year. Tenny came into my classroom and asked for the student data sheets I had built in Google Sheets. I told her honestly that even if I shared them, she wouldn't know what to do with them. I showed her the formulas, explained how I constantly adjusted them as students and classes changed, and walked her through the system. Then she asked if I could continue updating the datasheets even though I no longer held the leadership role. I told her professionally that I'd be happy to teach her how to do it, but I would need a stipend. She asked if the other leaders did what I used to do. I told her no, I was the only one, and I always had been. I won't lie, seeing her face go cold when she realized I wouldn't fold was satisfying. She had two options: spend hours doing data work herself or learn Sheets and Excel, something I knew she wouldn't do. And then there were the parents. 99% of parents are wonderful, truly, but that 1% can make your life miserable. I've overheard Tenny complaining about being stuck on the phone with difficult parents for 45 minutes at a time, losing her entire grading period. Those calls used to take me 5 minutes. I knew how to stop circular arguments and get parents on my side. Now, she has the stipend, about $1,500 a year, but I no longer deal with extra meetings, extra calls, and constant miscommunication. She's experiencing all the stress I did and more. I feel a little ashamed of how much joy I get from it, but she made my life hell in a place I otherwise love. Have fun, Tenny. Commenter 1. As a former teacher who is now disabled, I absolutely love this for your new boss and Tenny. Educators are some of the most ablest people I've ever encountered, and I don't understand why. Your accommodations were basic, reasonable, and something they should have known how to handle. They can live with the consequences of their choices, while you enjoy an easier year. OP reply. Yes, it's wild to watch colleagues bend over backwards for students with even mild disabilities, yet do nothing for fellow adults.
Students witnessed Tenny completely dismissing me multiple times. I can't imagine the message that sent them. My accommodations were basic workplace practices. Important information should be in writing. Even hearing people miss things all the time. Commenter 2. Honest question. If you have hearing loss, why don't you use hearing aids? OP reply. Great question. Sensory processing disorder isn't typical hearing loss. Hearing aids don't help because the issue is how the brain processes sound, not volume. Song lyrics are the worst. For example, in Romeo and Juliet by Taylor Swift, I hear complete nonsense sounds instead of lyrics. I get the general idea, but not the words. My condition isn't as severe as others, but it's still frustrating, especially with important information. Update. It's been a semester, so here's an update. Things have been going incredibly well for me. My $1,500 stipend was never worth the mental load. Losing the leadership role lifted an enormous weight. I've had more time for community projects, haven't taken work home once, and I honestly feel like a better teacher. Tenny, on the other hand, is miserable. She's always one of the last teachers to leave, frequently forgets meetings, and struggles constantly. Despite my accommodation now being officially registered with the district, she still isn't considerate of it. Recently, my boss introduced shared meeting documents and calendars across all teams, exactly what I had been doing before. Tenny was visibly annoyed. A trusted colleague later told me that Tenny and 2 other teachers had complained about my lack of preparation. One of them, who I'll call Ben, teaches the same English subject I do. English is one of the most heavily tested subjects, so this matters. With my extra time and energy, I focused heavily on improving student performance. I researched new strategies and put everything into practice. At an all-staff meeting, my boss announced that our grades English scores had increased by 20% compared to the previous year. Then she said, "Be sure to check your students' individual scores to see how you contributed." My students drove that increase. Tenny's and Ben's scores were slightly lower. My boss congratulated me privately and gave me the highest job review scores of my career. She even asked if I could share my strategies with Tenny and Ben. I shared the documents, but nothing else. Best of all, due to lack of funding, the leadership position is being eliminated next year. Tenny went through all of that drama for 1 year. I'm focusing on my growth, my students, and the colleagues who actually respect me. I'm happier. My students are happier. And to anyone with a disability, get your accommodations officially documented. Seriously. Commenter 1. Go OP. Crappy admin and a few jerks, but you handled it perfectly.
I'm rooting for you.
That's the full story. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. More Reddit stories coming soon.